Welcome to Troubleshooting Surface Finish Issues for ProCut PFM lathes. Here is an example of a clean cut. This rotor was machined with a properly working ProCut lathe. Troubleshooting starts with reading the surface finish results. If the surface is smooth and even from inside to outside and there are no visible record grooves or concentric rings, then you can be sure that it is ready for the friction material. Here's an example of a mild record cut. This can be caused by either chipped cutting tips or incorrect or inferior cutting tips. To correct, rotate the cutting tip to a fresh corner or replace the cutting tips with the correct ProCut versions. 50-742 is our standard carbide, 50-743 is our PCBN polycubic boron nitride tip, or our newest tip is the 50-778 Performance Plus. Always be certain the correct cutting tip screws are used and tightened firmly. Always remember to clean the tip pocket when you're rotating cutting tips or replacing them. Always start on the first dot and rotate clockwise to the second and third dot. On newer 50-778 cutting tips, you'll start on the ProCut brand mark, then move to 2-dot and 3-dot locations. Always use the correct wrench type for your cutting tip screw. We now use a T8 for the newer 778 cutting tips, or for the older 742 cutting tips, you can use a 2mm hex wrench. Here is an example of a severe record cut. This can be caused by a loose drawbar, the cutting head not being tight on the slide plate, or the cutting arms not being locked down. For a correction, tighten the drawbar firmly by hand before beginning the cut. Tighten the rear cutting head lock lever first, and then tighten the forward tool arm lock lever securely. Always tighten the drawbar firmly, but by hand only. For 12 series cutting heads, 1200, 1250, 1280, and 1299, secure all 4 levers firmly before beginning the cut. For 220 and 1330 cutting heads, center the cutting head and secure the rear lever first, then fully secure the forward tool arm lock lever before beginning your cut. Here's an example of chatter. Chatter is caused by looseness in the gib, or a missing chip deflector, or a damaged gearbox. To correct, check your gib by rocking the slide plate side to side, and then adjust if there is any looseness. Always use the correct chip deflector for your type of cutting head and rotor. And if the gearbox is damaged, contact your local ProCut rep or ProCut service department at 1-800-543-6618, option 2. To confirm whether your gib is adjusted properly, hold the slide plate on either side and attempt to wiggle it to see if there is any movement. If there is movement in the gib, it will need to be adjusted. See the gib adjustment video for detailed instructions or contact your local rep. For 12 series cutting heads, always use the 50-773 green chip deflector. This has the correct profile and will fit most securely around the rotor. For 220, 238, and 1330 cutting heads, use the 50-703 yellow chip deflector for small vented rotors and the 50-744 green chip deflector for larger or thicker rotors. For solid thin rear rotors, always use the 50-754 red deflector. For best results, the spring should be under the lock lever and the block should be nested over the cutting tip screw heads. Here's an example of concentric rings. This is caused by feed screw misalignment. To correct, adjust the feed block until the screw is straight and centered. This is an example of a feed screw that is not centered and will need to be adjusted because it will cause concentric rings. For detailed instructions on feed screw alignment, see ProCut gib adjustment video or contact your local ProCut rep. The 4 key steps to a perfect cut are a properly adjusted gib, properly adjusted feed screw, a clean and properly adjusted cutting head, and the correct ProCut brand cutting tips and chip deflectors. For further questions on surface finish issues, please contact your local ProCut rep or our service department.